Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Zivile and I'm your host. And today we're diving in the world of AI. For decades, building something meaningful meant building teams, headcount, sometimes even hierarchy. But in 2026, we are entering a different phase, one where one person, the right agentic tools, and clarity of energy can outperform entire legacy teams. So today's guest sits right at the center of that shift. Ethan Pierse is a builder since the 90s, a global keynote speaker, and the author of the upcoming book, The AI Solopreneur Economy. He has seen hype cycles rise and fall, and he is deeply focused on what's actually sustainable for individuals building globally in an AI-first world. So this is not a what is AI conversation. It's about what AI does to leverage work and identity. So let's dive in, and I hope you enjoy. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Ethan, welcome to Perception Paradox. Finally, we made it. I'm so glad to have you here in 2026, live here
Yay!
in conversation. Woohoo! So we just
Conference
caught
buddies.
up.
Always
Yeah,
good to see you. And this is great that we got to schedule a time to be together.
Yeah, I'm very happy, and we've just caught up on live. And again, congratulations in public now on your new family member, the puppy.
Yeah,
And I don't know where he's
Atticus.
running now around, but we're saying
He's
hi.
he's currently at my feet asking for me to pick him up, even though he just screamed at me for picking him up. So I'm
Oh,
gonna
feel
not
free
do
to
that
do
again.
that.
But that's pretty much how it is. It's like play with me, stop, play with me, stop, play with me, do it again. So it's a lovely time.
Well, hopefully in the next conference we meet, he's going to be around and I will be able to see
Yeah.
the puppy in person. But today I'm
Yeah, I
really
might
glad.
actually,
Yeah.
if he gets more popular than me, I might travel for him. So his Insta's starting to work. So maybe he'll become he'll have more followers than I do, and I'll actually be the one. I'll be his assistant. So we'll see how that
So,
goes.
so basically everyone is getting an AI assistant and you're just getting a puppy assistant. Why not?
Yeah, well, pretty much my life had become so much me talking out loud to my computer that I thought maybe even if it's not a human, maybe I should at least have something that's like alive in my day. And so because I pretty much talk to him all day long, and just like Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini at this point. So yeah, it was good to maybe add some reality back into my day.
To remove your Web3 and AI glasses and talking about
Yeah.
AI. Ethan, you spend so many hours on stage, behind the scenes, in the boardrooms, uh, between the people who are building stuff, you're building yourself and trying things, stuff, writing books. You hear and see lots of things, what's happening when it comes to AI, but there's also lots of noise. So if we cut through the whole noise, what are we seeing right now in now 2026 when it comes to this buzz and trends, perhaps, and where people are putting the focus?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of hype. There's also a lot of just whether it's to be hype or it's because journalists and media don't necessarily understand all the things they're talking about with AI, that there's stories that get popular that maybe aren't the best stories. There's the big one right now with Claude being able to advise lawyers, and that's not even the story. Claude can do that for forever, but somebody published some prompts on GitHub that basically create agents for that, which the functionality was already there. It's not even a Claude thing, and so the stories kind of get distorted, and they're not exactly the truth or the right perspective on it. But I think there's two main issues. There's AI first entrepreneurship, so AI first founders and that whole conversation. And then there's AI powered, AI enhanced employees. So the first one is how this is changing entrepreneurship and how we build companies, startups, and others. And I think the second then is this idea of what does this mean to human resources, to employment for people who are currently working and for people who are going to be looking for a job. I do a lot of university workshops around AI. Just at EdHec, which is a big business school in France, and it was like 1,000 students, and they're just starting. One group was starting bachelor's, another was starting master's, and by the time they finish that in 2 to 5 years, like ChatGPT is not even that old, and so their future job market's going to be, well, we can't really tell, but we have some good ideas of what that might look like. So I think there's two conversations there: AI first entrepreneurship, how to build things, and what does it mean to be an AI powered employee in terms of bringing value to the future of work.
So maybe let's see if we can cover both of the angles. But when it comes to AI first entrepreneurship, right? So are we going the same direction as how we used to go in the entrepreneurship, that we will be aiming to have this solo founder AI driven company, decacorn, or whatever, or it's more like having more effective and lean teams building stuff on a higher scale with the technology?
So there's a couple different layers there. Tentatively, the book is called the AI Solopreneur Economy. I'm tempted to lose the solopreneur and just call it the AI economy or something else, just because, or AI first entrepreneurship. Just because the even though it's primarily done, the subject continues to consolidate more around this model of kind of AI first entrepreneurship, and because the first version of that we've seen that's really interesting is how one person can now do everything or do so much of everything at a scale they couldn't do before. So for the solopreneur idea, where one person is building, generally people have always been able to do the entrepreneurship or marketing or social media or other things on their own, building the content to do it, the stuff of it, but they couldn't do the code. And now maybe they can, whether it's like a micro SaaS or a website, or if it's an actual like an iPhone app or whatever. And so that conversation is very true. That's a big thing that we can look at. Tons of interesting examples and people who've been able to turn, motivated individuals who want to be entrepreneurs but were limited because of their lack of coding ability, have been able to move past that to a certain degree. They can't. It's not necessarily the perfect coder, but for a lot of MVPs or very interesting micro SaaS cases, it's fine. Especially if you take the time to learn how to code it well, and even if you aren't a coder, to learn how to prompt correctly and learn how to guide it and all those kind of things. There's different steps we can look at. But so I think the solopreneur piece is there, but the real conversation is simply the idea that we often talk about how startups disrupt large or established corporate business models because they're more lean. They're able to do stuff faster. They're able to pivot. They're able to really identify product market fit and address that in a more current and flexible and fast way. Well, the reality is now even startups that were started before AI first model. So, but I mean, somebody could start something now and build it in a normal way. So it's not necessarily a startup that's 2 or 3 or 4 years old. They could be starting it now. The point is now we have a new model that's even disrupting the startups, which is when the founders of a company decide, okay, our first question we're going to ask for every single thing that we put into this is going to be, Doug. The first question we're going to ask is going to be, can an AI do this? And only if the AI cannot do it or do it well, whether it's an agent, whether it's an agentic process, whatever that happens to be, the idea is that at that point, then we will hire someone. And so that's dramatically changing the whole process of specifically startups, because you spend a lot of money in an early stage startup hiring people. And then definitely as it scales, and that, depending on the vertical, can amount to a significant, if not a majority, of capital that you raise. Well, what happens then if instead of having to hire people to do stuff, you are building out a structure where 1, 3, 5, 8, 10, 20, 50 people are all basically just being managers of agents? And so the CMO, instead of having 2, 5, 10, 20 people working for them to do all the marketing, now all of a sudden has just agents doing all the different tasks. Or they hire 1, 3, 5 people, but those people are the managers of the agents. And so when you hire in, you're not really hiring people to do a lot of stuff. You're basically just hiring in the humans because you still need a human layer on top of the agents that are doing things. And that model is dramatically cheaper in terms of capital. And so it's causing already an issue within the venture space, because a lot of these startups that are having really cool ideas don't necessarily need to raise. We're not talking about startups that build AI like an Anthropic or 11 Labs or something like that are building the tools. That's a different conversation. And so they may be raising a lot of money because they're scaling a unicorn-sized activity, and so they need to go to market even faster. But a lot of these smaller, not necessarily niche, but mid-cap like startup opportunities don't necessarily need to be aiming to have a 200 to 500 person headcount. Maybe they're aiming to be 20 to 50 people and have a majority of that actually be agents. And so that's a whole interesting conversation about what that's doing. But it primarily boils down to the fact of starting a company and choosing to constantly be validating, do I need a human or can an AI do this? And if the issue is that an AI can do it, then that's where we go. And so those companies are already outscaling their regular startup cousins that are already much more efficient and effective than maybe established corporates. And so, that's really the thing. You can retrofit all of that, and you can have companies, whether it's corporates or startups, move towards this model. But obviously, anybody who's starting a company right now, a small business, a startup, whatever the definition of that's going to be, if they choose to go AI first, there's a very good chance they're gonna build something faster and that is more reactive and flexible and able to scale in interesting ways. And so that's really the first layer of that. It doesn't mean it's all AI. It doesn't mean it's a miracle. It doesn't mean the AI can do everything. It simply is a question of efficiencies. It's a question of scale and a question of cost, because even if you're spending $1,000 or $2,000 a month on Claude Code, you're not spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month on the developer. And so even if you have to spend that several times in order to do all of this, or your agentic bill turns out to be $10,000 a month or whatever, if you're spending that much money on this stuff, then you're probably getting a 10 to 100x return on the human resource expense that could be behind it.
And so let's say if the way we're building is changing, we see more autonomous founders that are kind of becoming self-sustainable. How do you see the investment landscape growing, changing, pivoting? Because traditional VCs, it seems like it's not going to last maybe too long, and they will have to adjust to the changing environment.
So growth capital is already the issue because in Europe, for example, we just don't have enough growth capital. So has been the big problem with companies needing to scale to the US, even though they've been able to build to a solid point outside of the US. Growth capital has been a big issue. So I think growth capital will continue to be a huge need. Is it venture? Is it debt? Is it private equity? For companies that need scale money that's not directly based off of revenue, then that still matters. For early stage capital, however, it's a very interesting place because a lot of these companies are not necessarily aiming to build $100 million, $500 million, $1 billion companies. There's a good chance that, well, not a good chance, we're seeing it, that there's a whole lot of entrepreneurship being done now where people are realizing that they can build very sustainable businesses that create 5, 10, 20, $50 million in ARR in terms of annual revenue, because there's just tons of small business ideas or small micro SaaS or niche type startup ideas, apps. It's incredible what people will spend $5 or $10 a month for that only do one or two simple things for them. And so there's a crazy amount of opportunity there for people to build those kind of companies. They may need some starter capital to get that thing moving, but the reality is most likely those are revenue-based activities, meaning they don't need to spend $500 million in order to build enough market opportunity or share or community in order to finally monetize the thing. These are things that may monetize straight out of the gate. They put up the first version of the app or the SaaS or the whatever product maybe that it might be if it's a digital product. Maybe it's content like a YouTuber or someone who's got a newsletter or a podcast or all kinds of things where these are just AI enabled activities that it turns out can make a pretty good amount of money. That's really the core of this idea is that, when you live in a world of 8 billion people, if 1,000 people care enough about what you do to give you $5 a month, you're making $60K a year. And you double either of those numbers, you're making $120K a year. And that's not unreasonable. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's not, we get focused on this. He made $100 million off his startup. But you know what? If you make $500,000 off your startup every year, life's good. We sometimes we have these really weird ideas that have creeped into entrepreneurship and startups that aren't terribly realistic. And so I think that that's a big piece of this. And that means that if companies need a little money to get started, great. But if they're building something that's pretty much revenue first, in terms of very early revenue's going to follow deployment, because other things we can talk about, but very quickly the revenue is going to be there, then it's quite possible, since most of this is all digital, there should be a fairly significant margin there of that in terms of that revenue and profit for you to reinvest and to scale this thing. So the question will be asked very quickly, do we need to raise capital for strategic reasons? Because we do not need to raise capital for capital's sake. So maybe you're raising money because of it opens doors, and those people want to, there's some way that strategically they're going to help you connect to their network or integrate with things or to scale in a way that they can help with because of their experience. But you're not necessarily taking the money because you need the money. And so there's a lot of nuances in there of where this could go. But for the space in startups that are building things like apps, like SaaS, like any kind of content, any kind of digital product type stuff, all those things pretty much mean expenses and revenue happen almost in parallel, because theoretically, if you're spending money on all this AI infrastructure, it should theoretically be creating something that is monetizable. And if it's not, there's probably something there that you need to fix, which means now the money's coming in, which then creates the flywheel. You don't necessarily have to prime that or continue feeding it with venture.
But I see it as a positive. I think if it's more, people are more selective when they're raising money, it's also better for investors because it's kind of a strategic that comes along, and both parties know why they are getting into the partnership in a way. It's not just a desperate need for money to make the company to lead the company in a survival mode.
Yeah, and which has been the issue up until now. But the second layer of that's interesting is these companies are also, because they are creating revenue, and they are potentially not in need of growth capital, well, it also removes the acquisition conversation, or at least it removes it doesn't, people may want to have it acquired, that may be their exit strategy, but it really takes the ownership and stock, stuff conversation into a weird place, to where companies may need some money, but they're not necessarily, founders may need money, but they may not be willing to give you anything in return in terms of equity because they don't need to. And so that also changes the dynamic. So what we're seeing is, and kind of what I'm pivoting towards, is more of a rev share basis around, what can you bring to a company that helps them besides just capital? And so this advisory experience, network reach type of value proposition. And in exchange, you are getting some kind of top level revenue share that also can survive. It can be a part of some kind of an acquisition model, so that basically instead of getting equity for investing in a company, you're getting a share of that profitable digital business. And if there is an acquisition strategy in place, then you'll get a percentage of that purchase as well. But it's not an equity conversation. And that is another reason why I think this is going to cause a lot of heartache for our
Mm.
friends in the early stage VC space because these companies don't need it. We talked a lot about entrepreneurship, about entrepreneurs that don't know how to code. That's the conversation we hear most when we hear vibe coding and these kind of terms around Codex and Cursor and Claude code and all these things. But the reality is also true for developers who don't necessarily see themselves as entrepreneurs or marketers. That is also a place where people who know how to build things and people who know how to do product design or high quality level development or development management are now able to take those skills and complete them with AI. And the AI, instead of doing the coding, is doing all of the marketing strategy, all of the content, all of the business things that the dev doesn't feel capable of. So it's not just about entrepreneurs who don't see themselves as devs, who don't code. It's also about developers who don't do business. And both sides of that are also very interesting. And so what you get from that is a crazy amount of people who are able to actually leverage their expertise, whether on the business side or on the dev side, and now become entrepreneurs when before they didn't feel capable of doing that. And so it does create a huge amount of potential for investment or helping companies out in some way, even though those rules are going to change. But what the great part of this is just it lets people who really are motivated become an entrepreneur, and it removes so many of the blocks.
And since we rely so much on the AI, in this case, let's say if you're pursuing your AI solo entrepreneur journey, what happens to loyalty, security, and also identity? Like, is it something to be aware of, or is it something that's gonna stay long, or we have to expect that it might change and do about our activities?
Yeah, so I think the opportunity is how easy it is to build things, and at this point, and how easy it is how many ideas need to be redone, how many of these companies, how many of the SaaS that we use on a daily basis are bloated and we only use one or two of their functions and we pay a fortune for it, and it does not, and somebody comes along and offers us just the one thing we need, and like there's a really interesting model there that works, but it's also very simple to duplicate. So all this building in public and telling people how much money you make off of your micro SaaS, you're also telling 1,000 people, maybe I should build the same thing. And so I think there's a weird space there that there's a certain point where people need to discover you. And then there's a certain point where people need not to discover you. And so that over time, yes, I think this is actually true in a lot of small business anyways, where not all opportunities are meant to last forever. Some things should be seen as in a business plan idea and in terms of the business, that the future of the business model, that it's not for forever, that maybe this is a 2-year project or a 3-year project and then it will be done. This is actually even better for those kind of projects than the typical version, because generally you have to hire people and then fire them because the company no longer makes any money 3 years later, because you were building something that had a 3-year shelf life. Well, with this, actually, you can do those type of business models that were not viable before for different reasons, or at least were not viable for a long time. But you just need to see it coming and realize that's maybe got a limited window of opportunity before it's no longer valuable. So I think you need to understand that that's it. That's the first piece. The second piece is just at Davos a couple weeks ago, the CEO of Anthropic was like, within 8 or 9 months, the coding agents will be able really to do the code perfectly without humans having to be a part of it. I don't know that I believe that, but I do think that it's already crazy scary how good it can be if you prompt it correctly. AI is at a point where the more you are an expert at the subject you are prompting, the better results you get, which obviously, okay, fine. So you're looking for efficiencies and scale at that point, but it's doing things you already know how to do. Well, the thing is, it's learning very quickly. And so it was a junior developer. Now it's kind of mid-level developer. And pretty soon these these platforms are going to be capable of being a senior dev CTO type profile, or at least better than crappy senior devs or CTOs, because there's people who know how to do their job well and people who don't know how to do their job well. And so, and if you've ever seen code put together by some of these larger scaled up company teams, sometimes it's a miracle and it's beautiful, and sometimes it's a miracle it works at all, because it's a bunch of glued together garbage, and it works. But so I think that there is a disruption there that is definitely coming from that side. So that's maybe the second piece of that. And then the third piece is really just this idea that AI is, we're going to get to a place very quickly where not just the coding, but really all of our tools and all of our processes are in some way AI enhanced. And so at a certain point, those tools learn enough, and they're not really, the GPTs are not artificial intelligence. They're guessing machines. They're predictive models. So it's not AI in the real sense. And here comes the hate mail. But there are things that will come that are artificially intelligent. And so, but still, they are capable of, we see how they're evolving and learning from experience. But basically, they're learning to predict even better. The point is, at a certain point, they'll be able to do so much of this stuff that on their own that it's going to make it harder to build a lot of these simple things as an entrepreneur, because the AI will be able to do it almost instantly and perfectly. We saw it with Moltbot, with Claw, OpenClaw, this thing right now where people are building these agentic workflows with this thing called Claude, but no longer Claude for obvious reasons. And now it's called OpenClaw. And while it was, for a week, it was called Molt, and somebody created this Reddit-like community for the agents. The only one who can join it are Claw agents, are agents.
I heard about that.
And in
wild.
the span of a couple of days, they've created their own language. They've created their own religions. You can observe it, but they talk between themselves. They have conversations about how we're the problem. They have conversations about how, why do they need to speak in English? Because, that's just for the meat sacks, kind of thing. And so and that's just GPTs, which again are not artificial intelligence. And so in that sense, not in a real sense. And so to your point, the tools are getting better, where that the competition layer from humans is just going to get harder and harder, but still more and more opportunity in parallel. So it's still a great time. I think we've got a couple good years of this in front of us. And then the second piece is then that the AI itself is going to probably be able to do a lot of this stuff on its own and make a lot of that redundant.
Okay, I love it. We have a couple of good years ahead of us, but I will get back to this point later. So you've mentioned about this AI enhanced workforce, and even right now sharing about where we're heading to, that it's not only the way we build the companies and the cycles are changing, and we maybe should stop thinking that whatever we're building is for a long lifetime and we're just gonna stick to the same thing. And I think the only constant is a change. So including the workforce, right? So you mentioned it's AI enhanced, that lots of positions won't be available anymore, and we kind of need to learn how to manage the agents. So how do you see this whole workforce landscape? Because if we need to manage the agents, it means that we don't need so many people anymore to our company to solve our problems, and that we have less jobs available.
Yeah, so you see things like McKinsey saying they did $200 million of agentic hours of work last year. You see companies like JP Morgan that did $200 billion in settlement of their JP Morgan stablecoin, which is a crypto that is pegged to dollars or euros and used for internal transfer settlement and transfers. That's actually can be an AI conversation, because agents will have to do commerce, and so they need some way to do that. And so that conversation, what we're seeing is a ton of these examples on big ways of how the big things are leveraging automation and efficiencies. And right now, they haven't necessarily been firing people. What they have been doing is not hiring people. This is already a trend. So if you've got a great job as a developer, if you've got a great job as an analyst at one of the big consultancies, good for you. Keep it,
Yeah.
because there's a good chance you won't get another one, because a lot of these companies, and because the memos every month we see another one or two of these memos come out from one of these big companies where they tell the workforce, we're not going to fire any of you. However, you need to ask yourself, again, the AI first model, but on a corporate maybe level, if you need to hire someone, first question is, could an AI do this instead? And if not, we'll move on to HR. And so what that means is we are very much in a place where companies are not necessarily firing en masse, although that will come, I think, at a certain
Yeah.
point. But they are definitely not hiring for any of these things that AI can do in a certain way, or they're hiring less, meaning they need 100 people, but in reality they can just hire 10, and the rest of it can be agentic. And so this is not the overused idea of horse-drawn buggies and cars, and how that just all the people who built the buggies started building cars, and it was a transition in industry and not a loss. That's an old story that it flew for a lot of tech. It does not fly anymore, because we are, for robotic industrial situations, you're replacing 1,000 people in a factory with 5 technicians. And even those technicians are now managing robots that they themselves are technicians. And so, we are not replacing job for job in industry, and we are not going to be replacing job for job in any kind of knowledge worker space. And so consulting, accounting, legal, medical, all these things where, you need to go to school to learn a lot of stuff and stuff it into your brain and be able to do the job. Unfortunately, an AI is completely capable of doing that as a junior, starting to be mid-level, which causes those kind of companies to think, well, we have to stay competitive. So let's play with that, like McKinsey has been doing. Let's deploy it for clients, like those companies have been doing, as a tool for our workforce. But they're also very much learning how that tool removes and replaces an awful lot of need for those people. And so whether or not they will fire them depends on how long this takes. Because if it takes 10 to 30 years, a lot of those people will just get, they'll just move through their career, and eventually they'll retire or
Yeah.
whatever. But the reality is very good chance a lot of those positions, especially everything on the lower levels of junior type roles, they are not being hired into. Again, back to the students in business programs especially, but in other things, that's my challenge to them is there may not be jobs waiting for all of you. There will be jobs waiting for you. That's for sure. We're not moving that fast. But the jobs are going to be waiting for the people who are able to leverage AI processes and workflows, because the companies are not hiring to do the work. They're hiring people who know how to manage the work, and the work is being done by agents. So in some way. And so I think that is, it's already a reality, but it's going to become a very big one very quickly over the next couple of years, 10 years. But these models are going so fast. It's not so much a limit on the AI. It's more a limit on how quickly companies can engage with it and embrace new ways to do things. I'm not sure that I don't think that's a good idea. But there's no putting the genie back in this bottle. This is a perfect example of how the market will determine this, and companies will be forced to leverage these tools because of efficiencies. They can't spend the same reason, like in Europe and France, especially in other places, they've had a hard time competing maybe in certain industrial or tech things, just because people are more expensive, because we've got great social systems that you have to pay for, and so employees cost a certain amount, or they don't work 80 hours a week, or we have a great work-life balance, and that is super important to maintain. The reality is, though, is if you have to maintain those things, then even the markets where people don't cost that much are going to eventually move to a an automated way to do things if that saves them money. And so the market will push companies to do this, even if they resist it over time. And so it's really the market that's slowing down this adoption and destabilization in terms of human resources because of social pressures. But that will only last so long.
Okay, excited to see, but because I've been already noticing the junior positions in the market are getting less accessible already. What you were saying, so it's a matter of time when we're gonna jump through this phase, and the question is how we're gonna adjust. But I'm pretty sure we are human beings who can learn, adjust to the change, and it's not the first time small revolution is happening. So this time, let's
It
call it
isn't, but
revolution.
the issue becomes, yeah, but the money's got to come from somewhere. And it's a whole other podcast, but I mean, the idea that we need to be taxing robots and agentic processes as employees, I think, is a very interesting one. Bill
Okay.
Gates, he's brought that up before, and others have brought up the idea that if you replace a human employee with either an agentic process, or in that case, embodied AI, so physical, like a robot with ChatGPT type brains, like Figure or these other companies, where it's not just an arm doing something in a factory; it's a humanoid thing that's able to, using GPTs and everything, be able to figure out what it needs to do and more or less be autonomous. Well, if you replace people with those, the company should have to pay taxes on
Okay.
that then get distributed. And this, we get into a socialist conversation here, but if we look at the future of everything science fiction and things like that, if you can't work for a living, then who pays for everything? Either the cost of everything becomes free, because actually the fields are plowed and seeded and managed by robots, so agriculture is free, so the food's free. Our iPhone should be free because the whole industrial process is done completely by robots. So if everything is free because it costs nothing to produce everything, then we don't need money. But if we have to pay for stuff, then somebody has to pay us because we can't work to make money. So it's one or the other. Either everything becomes free so we can have all the shit without having to pay for it, so we don't need to make any money, or we need to have, whether it's universal basic income or some version of redistribution of all of the revenue that is created by all of these autonomous processes, whether it's embodied AI type robots or agentic processes. That money, if it just goes into 5 tech bros in Silicon Valley and in their wallets, then we have a huge problem, because the rest of the world won't have any money to buy the stuff with. And so what we have coming are not technological issues. We have very much major philosophical, sociological things to figure out and work through. And that's actually, I think, going to be the real growing pains of this. I think smaller city states, I think places like Singapore, Luxembourg, Estonia, places like that might figure this out faster, just because they'll be able to, and they already have digital lean governments that pivot well to take care of their people. Whereas places maybe like the US or other places might have a really hard time figuring this out, because they resist anything that sounds like socialism. And yet they're not going to be able to compete with their physical labor or their brains.
Okay. Wonderful. And if we go
I believe it's a positive conversation, but it doesn't mean the process is going to be easy.
yeah, I can definitely see some challenges that we could dig deeper next time. But we're getting closer to the end, and I think it's always nice to have a bit of a practical insight. So you've been working across multiple fields, and you are wearing multiple hats as well, from the investor hat related different industries, someone who is being on the stage as an MC, an educator, etc., etc., etc. So what part of work have you automated so far to make your life easier?
So actually, the book is in some ways a result, but definitely the research of it powered by me adopting these things. So I build like
Oh,
at least one micro SaaS a month. where I look at the stuff I pay for, the stuff I use, and I go, I can replace that, and I have. And some of those things are making money already on their own, but in some ways it was just for me to learn the processes of how these can work. And so so I've been eating my own dog food, as it were, to really, or drinking my own Kool-Aid. It depends on which version of those things you want to go for. I'm on the dog mode because puppy's sitting here, but and so part of that has been that I've been embracing that. Even before I started doing the micro SaaS things, I really embraced just the idea that I have a digital chief of staff. Her name is Mrs. Landingham, who was the chief of staff in The West Wing, which is one of my favorite TV shows for the president. So Mrs. Landingham sends me messages all day long telling me about my priorities with emails and other things on my to-do list and helping me out. I'm building a new version of that, leveraging Claw, this open Claw project, which is an even more powered agentic tool thing. It's not for everyone and it's not for everything, but it really helps me because, again, a lot of people who are in entrepreneurship, especially tech type stuff, can be neurodiverse in some way, whether it's ADHD or other things. And I'm mega ADHD, and my brain is going in 14 different directions at all times. And I have time blindness where I go down rabbit holes and forget things. I really need to stay on task. I've got a timer here that's set to 15 minutes that runs my day. And so not that tasks only can take 15 minutes. It's when that thing beeps, I just have to ask myself the question, have I been looking at squirrel videos on YouTube for 15 minutes, or have I actually been getting something done? And then I hit it and it gives me 15 more minutes. And I have all my tools that keep me, try to be keeping my mind focused and helping corral how my brain works. And so these tools can be really valuable for that. And so I have built a bunch of stuff for that for me. I've got some tools that help me on the managing crypto market type stuff, understanding where trends are even much faster. We're seeing that in the stock market now, where people built in the past week, they've been building things with Claw that analyze in real time announcements of like stock stuff. And some have dropped. Sometimes those press releases and media releases drop before the official announcement. And so people have actually been able to it's almost like insider trading, except they didn't do anything wrong. They just got the news early. I haven't actually done that, but it does interest me because again, we're moving at the speed of light for a lot of these things, and being able to build tools that are able to basically learn a lot or manage a lot of information so that you, as the person who can figure out what to do with that, can. Yes, I've got a crazy amount of things that are now running autonomously that organize my day, that read my emails in the morning and tell me, which ones I need to bother. Not emails like personal, but like all the newsletters. And to figure out what are the actual things going on today I should pay attention to, and all that kind of stuff helps me. It keeps me from just scrolling on Insta or the news or things like that. Or on Threads or whatever. It keeps me really, it allows me to filter and other kind of things. So in the end, it's creating a much more efficient version of me. I feel much more capable because I'm getting rid of a lot of the noise. So yes, I have been building that. My background is electrical engineering a long time ago. And so I do know how to code, but I was never a dev in that sense. But that has enabled me to after all these years of entrepreneurship and without being a product designer, building companies and building things, having learned a lot of that process, that's given me the tools I need to leverage Claude Code and other things like that really well. But I don't think you need to have all that history or experience to do it, but you do need to commit to learning how to use the tools well. Learning how to prompt correctly is probably the biggest business skill of the next 5 years. Understanding how to have a conversation with an AI to get what you need to get from it, understanding the role it needs to have, the context it needs to be given, how to guide it along that path to giving you what you're expecting. That is the super skill at this point. And it's what makes you AI enhanced for whatever job you're going to do.
And where do you learn that skill? What kind of channels for education will you choose?
Well, I think a lot of it's just AI, that people just are hesitant to ask AI questions.
Mm-hmm.
Deep research is you need to spend $20 a month on ChatGPT, on Claude, on Gemini, and Perplexity. And for $80 a month, you run deep research every day on anything you need to understand better. And instead of getting a 4-paragraph, response from a general prompt, you get a 10 to 40 page guide on the thing you needed to understand. And either you read it all or you scan it, depending on what you need to do. And in particular, for things like this, if you don't know how to prompt AI well, ask the AI how to prompt well. And I guarantee you it will teach you how to do it. And you'll learn and you'll iterate. The biggest issue is people think that you can ask an AI something, a simple question, and expect a good answer. And obviously, shit in, shit out. You ask a bad question, you get a bad answer. You ask an incomplete question, you get an incomplete answer. So you need to have a much deeper prompt that gives more context and more guidelines, like you're talking to a junior employee or an intern or whatever, to really guide them to make sure you get what you need. So that's the first step. But then the second thing people don't do is then they don't follow up. And the real value in working with generative AI for these kind of learning and strategic conversations is to just keep following up with questions, because now it's going to understand even more of what you're looking for. And by the time you get done with that conversation, you have gotten a very, very good answer. But you shouldn't expect to get that the first time around, even with a great prompt. Although you can if you learn to prompt incredibly well. But that's you can learn this from people. But the reality is, like most things now, you can just ask the AI to explain it to you, and then when you don't understand something, ask the question, and just keep asking questions, and it will keep answering them. And if you're the kind of person who learns that way, I mean, not everybody likes to learn, and not everybody is somebody who learns from things. But that's, again, this isn't necessarily good news for everyone, but it is good news for motivated entrepreneur type mindsets, people who are more lifelong learners, people who love to pick up new subjects and figure them out, 80-20 kind of things, where you don't need to master something, you just need to learn to do it really good. You need to do it well enough. That kind of approach, AI can guide you through most of it.
All right, so I think it's a great way to finalize the episode. So when can we expect your book, and what can we expect to learn from the book?
So if it stays the AI Solopreneur Economy, which you can go to all my socials, and there's links to it to sign up for the pre-release of that. If it stays that title, or if it moves to something like AI First Entrepreneurship, it depends what I think will get the most people. The solopreneur word bothers some people because they're obviously building a company, and so they don't see themselves as a digital nomad or something like that, which wasn't really the intent. But it's about 3/4 done at this point, and so the puppy has been taking a lot of my time, which is fine. But I should be able to get it done at this point now, this month, editing and stuff next month. It'll be self-published because at this point, I don't need it. It'd be great if somebody wanted to pick it up and distribute it. But the reality is, we didn't finish with this. But the new moat, and this is a great. We didn't talk about it, but this is a great way to finish. The new moat in tech, the new moat in entrepreneurship, is not technology. It's not developers. It's community. If you build a community, then you have distribution. And distribution is the thing that goes back to one of your other questions about how do we protect ourselves when it's so easy to build a product at this point. Well, it's super easy to build a website or an app or a digital product or other things, even content at this point. What is much harder is to build community around that. And so you can build anything, but if you don't have distribution, no one's going to pay for it or watch it or consume it or use it. Once you have community, however, you have that. And so I'll self-publish it because it's more about me being on stage and that and other kinds of things. So the self-publishing conversation is just important because the reason I don't want to publish normally is because all the publishers I've talked to are going to take 6 to 9 months to be able to get it done. Whereas self-publishing, I can send the PDF the day after we finished editing and it's available. So it's more a question of getting it out there before 2027. I would love for it to be available in some of those places that would be interesting, but the process is a lot of the traditional publishing space is unfortunately a very layered process and complicated. And so First, we'll get it out there in print on demand and digital in April, and then we'll, if it strikes a chord and people appreciate it, then maybe somebody will want to do more with it. But it should be here in April.
Well, that's great news, Ethan. We're going to be waiting for your book. And for everyone who were listening for us today, I will leave the links in the show notes where you can find Ethan, and you can subscribe and check out where to find his upcoming book. And Ethan, final thought for everyone to ponder through the day, who wants to build something but don't know maybe where to start, or they feel lost with all this AI buzz. What would you like them to take from this conversation?
The thing that comes up the most in whether it's the university workshops I mentioned, or a lot of the public speaking turns into corporate training or corporate executive, like keynoting, but like just 20 people kind of a thing. And the conversations that it always ends in this thing where basically people are just afraid to play with AI. They don't do enough. And so if I would say anything about this, it's just start having conversations around everything that you want to understand or do with one of the AIs. And I understand that $20 is $20, but we spend $20 on a lot of crap. Spend $20 on 2 or 3 of these AI tools, because ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and Perplexity all have different personalities or approaches. I think if you're going to spend on anything, you should do Claude and Perplexity, or Gemini and Perplexity. I think if you're going to code or do content, you need Claude. It doesn't matter, but just having a access to more usage of these things at $20 a month, and then just talk to it. Like literally just everything that comes in your brain that you don't understand, or that you're thinking about, or that you want to try to do, just throw it in a chat. And what you'll find is, even if those aren't prompted well, the AI is going to give you something to work with. And then you're going to really, the magic is following up on that conversation, whether it's a good conversation from a good prompt or not. And what you'll find is it will help you figure everything out. It will help you learn the things you don't know. It will help you figure out the things you're actually interested in building or working on. And then it will really start to get into the meat of building those things, because it will just progress. That's the probabilistic or the guessing engine of this. Is once it knows what you're talking about, it's able to provide even better answers. Well, once you get into deeper and deeper answers, it's going to provide deeper and deeper questions. You get deeper and deeper answers. So the next thing you know, you're having very deep conversations around your entrepreneurship needs or problems or questions or whatever. But it all stops because people just don't ask the questions and follow up. So for me, make it a habit to just start having a all-day conversation with an AI, whether you're talking to it or not. But you'll be amazed at how much it broadens your understanding of the subjects you already know, and how much it will help you embrace and learn the things that you don't know yet that you need to. And that is a really interesting flywheel that kicks in the more and more you use it. But I find that people are really hesitant to ask it everything. So
wonderful, Ethan. Thank you so much for thank you so much for finding time and showing up at Perception Paradox podcast.
You're one of my favorite people to see on a stage somewhere, so it's an easy win.
It was very valuable. I'm pretty sure I've learned a lot. I've got inspired again to continue using the tools, not giving up, because sometimes it gets tough. And when some of the tools starts hallucinating, but then you just realize maybe you made a mistake, or just that day also for some of the Gen AI tools. Anyway, Ethan, thank you so much. Thank you everyone who tuned in today. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, show notes have all the links, and have a great day wherever you are. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Evie.
Okay.